My wife mocked my struggles and called me weak, so I left her without warning. And now she's crying over the strengths she couldn't see. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and I used to believe love meant building together. When I met Mia in college, we were both broke dreamers, the kind who lived on instant ramen and promises of a better tomorrow. She used to laugh and say, "We'll look back at these days and realize they were the best ones." And I believed her. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that made the world feel manageable. I worked part-time at a warehouse while she finished her business degree. Every night, she'd wait up for me, curled up on our old thrift store couch with a blanket and that soft smile that made exhaustion feel worth it. We'd talk about the future, a little house, maybe a dog, someday kids who'd grow up knowing what love really looked like. I thought we were a team, a partnership, equal in dreams, equal in effort. When we finally married, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Our wedding wasn't fancy, just close friends, some homemade decorations, and vows whispered under cheap string lights. But the way she looked at me that day, eyes glistening with pride, I swore I'd never let her down. I didn't need a perfect life, just her. But something shifted after a few years. Mia's career took off faster than mine. She started earning more, meeting people who lived in condos, drove luxury cars, and casually talked about vacations in Paris. At first, I was proud of her. Then came the comments. "You should think about finding a more stable job. It's cute that you still work with your hands." They were small, almost playful, but they stung. The woman who once admired my hard work now seemed embarrassed by it. Our love, once a shared climb, started feeling like a race I hadn't realized we were running, and I was falling behind. Mia's transformation was gradual, like watching someone fade out of an old photograph. The woman who once celebrated payday pizza nights now scrolled through designer websites while sighing under her breath. At first, I ignored it. Everyone changes with time, right? But her tone began to shift from encouragement to quiet disappointment, a kind of judgment she didn't even bother hiding anymore. She started meeting her coworkers after hours for networking dinners. I'd wait up, the TV murmuring in the background, pretending not to notice how she came home smelling like expensive perfume and confidence I couldn't match. When I'd ask how her night was, she'd shrug, saying, "You wouldn't really get it, babe. It's a different world." That phrase, "a different world," stuck in my chest. I used to be her world. Now I was just an obligation that didn't fit the image she wanted to project. I worked for a small construction company. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved what I did, building things that would outlast me. Mia used to say that's what she admired about me, that I built while others just talked. But somewhere along the way, she stopped admiring and started comparing. She'd mention how her colleague's husband was a regional director, or how her friend's fiancés just got a Tesla. I laughed it off, but inside, I was collapsing. One night, she came home late again, scrolling through her phone while I reheated dinner. "Why don't you apply for something better?" she asked casually. "You're smart, you just lack ambition sometimes." I froze, spoon midair. "Ambition?" I whispered. "I'm breaking my back every day for us." She didn't look up. "For you? Maybe." That night I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, wondering when love had turned into performance. I wanted her to see me again, not as someone to fix, but someone worth standing beside. But I was starting to realize she didn't want a partner anymore. She wanted a trophy. It was a Saturday evening when Mia told me she'd planned a small dinner with her coworkers. I didn't think much of it. I figured it'd be a casual get-together. But when I saw the table, I realized it was anything but. Expensive wine, candles, polished silverware, everything screamed sophistication. I stood there in my worn jeans and button-up, suddenly aware that I didn't belong in my own house. Her friends started arriving one by one, the kind of people who talked in brand names and laughed like the world owed them comfort. I tried to keep up, but every time I spoke, the conversation shifted like I was invisible. When they asked what I did, I told them honestly, "I work in construction management." One of the women smiled politely, then said, "So, you're like a contractor. My husband uses those all the time." The table chuckled. I forced a smile. Then came the moment that still echoes in my head. One of her colleagues joked about blue-collar boyfriends, and Mia, my wife, smirked and said, "Yeah, my husband's basically a walking Home Depot." The laughter that followed felt like knives. My throat went dry. I looked at her, hoping to catch her eyes, to see even a flicker of regret. But she didn't meet my gaze. She was too busy laughing, basking in the approval of people who didn't know a damn thing about me. I excused myself, saying I needed some air. Outside, the cool night hit my face, and for the first time, I felt small, smaller than I ever had before. I'd worked my whole life to be dependable, honest, loyal. And yet, in that room, I was the punchline. When I came back in, Mia looked at me like I was ruining the mood. "You okay?" she whispered, tone sharp. "Yeah," I said, forcing calm. Just needed a breath. But deep down, something had broken. Not loud, not violent, just a quiet snap that would never fully heal. After that dinner, something between us went cold. Not suddenly, but like a slow frost creeping over everything that used to be warm. Mia acted as if nothing had happened, laughing with her friends and humming while cleaning the dishes the next morning. While I stood there replaying every second of that humiliation, I wanted to talk about it, to tell her how small she made me feel. But every time I opened my mouth, I saw that same dismissive flicker in her eyes. It wasn't worth another argument. Days turned into weeks. We still slept in the same bed, but it felt like two strangers occupying separate worlds. She started spending more time working late. Her phone was always face down, her tone sharper, her patience thinner. When I'd ask if something was wrong, she'd sigh, "Not everything's about you." "You know," I'd nod quietly. Even though it felt like everything was about me, about how I wasn't enough anymore, I started pouring myself into work. Extra shifts, weekend projects, anything to stay busy. My coworkers noticed. "You all right, man?" my foreman asked once. I just smiled and said, "Yeah, just trying to get ahead." But the truth was, I didn't want to go home. Home wasn't a refuge anymore. It was a daily reminder that the woman who once believed in me now pitied me. Some nights, she'd come home late, smelling faintly of wine and unfamiliar cologne. She'd slide into bed without a word, her back to me, and I'd stare at the ceiling in silence, wondering how love could feel so one-sided. One evening, as she was getting ready for another team outing, I finally asked, "Do you even want to be here anymore, Mia?" She paused, brushing her hair, and said without turning around, "Don't be dramatic. I just need space from all this, all this." I repeated, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. That silence, heavy, deliberate, said everything words. Couldn't I realize then that I was living with a stranger who had already emotionally left me? It happened. On a Sunday morning, one of those painfully quiet ones where the silence feels heavier than noise, Mia had gone out for her usual yoga and brunch routine, and I stayed behind to fix a leaky faucet. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for anything. But her phone buzzed on the counter. An instinct, or maybe something deeper, made me glance at the screen. A message preview lit up. "Ryan, wish you were here instead of that boring breakfast." My stomach dropped. I stared at the name, the casual tone, the intimacy of it. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. What I found wasn't explicit, but it didn't need to be. Late-night messages, private jokes, conversations about understanding and feeling seen. One message said, "He wouldn't get it. He's too simple." That one burned. I stood there gripping the counter, my hands shaking. Every part of me wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe he was just a friend. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew better. You don't message a coworker like that. You don't talk about your husband like that. Asterisk when she came home, smiling faintly, carrying an overpriced smoothie, I couldn't even look at her. She noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked. I tried to speak, but all that came out was, "Who's Ryan?" Her smile faltered for a split second, just long enough to confirm everything. "Seriously," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're going through my phone now. That's pathetic." "I saw the messages," I replied quietly. "You talk about me like I'm some ... burden." She crossed her arms. "You're twisting things. He's just someone I can talk to. You've been so distant lately." I laughed bitterly. "Distant? You humiliated me in front of your friends, and now you're flirting with your coworker." Her expression hardened. "You always make everything about your feelings." I wanted to scream, but instead, I just nodded. "Yeah," I said softly, "and maybe that's why I stopped having any left." I didn't know it then, But that moment, that hollow calm, was the beginning of the end. That night, after hours of pacing in the living room, I finally decided I couldn't let it go. The messages replayed in my mind like static, her laughter, her condescension, the way she'd spoken about me as though I were just some dull weight around her ankle. When she came out of the shower, wrapped in her robe and humming like nothing was wrong, I said quietly, "We need to talk." Her smile vanished. "If this is about Ryan again, it is," I interrupted. "And about us." She sighed dramatically, sat on the couch, and crossed her legs. "All right, fine. Go ahead." I sat across from her, my voice trembling. "Do you even love me anymore? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're ashamed of me." She tilted her head, smirking slightly, that smug expression she wore when she thought she was being rational. "Ashamed? Don't be ridiculous. I just expected more. I thought you'd want a bigger life. You've settled, and I can't live like that forever." Her words hit harder than any insult. "Settled? I've worked every day to give us stability, to build something real." She laughed, cold and humorless. "Stability isn't the same as success. You don't get it, do you? You're content with mediocrity." I stood there in silence, staring at the woman I once thought would grow old with me. "You used to say you admired how grounded I was." She shrugged. "Yeah, when we were broke college kids. But people evolve." That word evolve echoed like poison. I wanted to shout, to remind her who paid the bills when she couldn't, who stayed up with her when she cried over exams, who believed in her when no one else did. But looking at her now, I realized it didn't matter. She wasn't listening. She wasn't even there. I whispered, "You're not the woman I married." She smiled faintly. "And you're not the man I wanted you to become." That was it, the line that sealed it all. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just sat back, silent, watching the ashes of everything we built drift away. And I knew deep down something irreversible had happened. A week later, Mia told me she was going on a solo trip. Her words, not mine, to clear her head. She said she needed time to figure out what she really wanted. I just nodded, numb. There wasn't anything left to argue about. I offered to drive her to the airport. She hesitated, then agreed, as if humoring a stranger. The drive was silent, except for the low hum of the engine. I remember glancing at her reflection in the window, perfect makeup, .com expression, scrolling through her phone without a hint of guilt. I wanted to ask if she was meeting Ryan, but the truth felt useless now. The woman sitting beside me wasn't my wife anymore. She was someone I used to know. When we reached the terminal, she said softly, "Don't wait up. I'll call when I'm back." I forced a smile. "Take care, Mia." She paused for half a second, as if wanting to say something, but instead just walked away, heels clicking against the pavement, suitcase rolling behind her. I watched until she disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by motion, by life that no longer included me. Driving home, the silence inside the car felt suffocating. Every song on the radio sounded like mockery. When I walked into the house, the emptiness hit me, her perfume lingering, her side of the closet half empty, the faint indentation of her pillow still there. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall clock. The ticking was the only sound. I didn't eat that night. I didn't sleep either. I just sat there, thinking about how everything I'd worked for, the sacrifices, the overtime, the faith in us, had meant nothing. At one point, I found myself whispering, "What did I do wrong?" But deep down, I knew I hadn't failed her. I'd just stopped being useful to the version of her that cared more about image than love. And that realization, that quiet, unbearable truth, was the lowest I'd ever felt in my life. In the days that followed, I moved like a ghost through the house. I went to work, came home, stared at the same half-empty living room, and felt nothing. Pain had become a routine, quiet, predictable, exhausting. But one morning, as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, I didn't recognize the man looking back at me. He looked hollow, drained, like someone who'd been apologizing for existing too long. And that's when something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. I realized Mia had already left me emotionally, long before her flight. I'd been fighting for a marriage that no longer existed. So, instead of waiting for her to come home and tell me she was done, I decided to take that power back. The next few days, I started quietly preparing. I gathered documents, made copies of financial records, and transferred my portion of the joint savings into my personal account, money I had mostly earned anyway. I called my landlord friend about a small apartment across town. No explanations, no drama, just action. Then I sat down and wrote her a note. Just one paragraph, calm, detached. Maybe you were right back then. But not anymore. I've stopped waiting for you to see my worth, because I finally do. I placed it on her vanity table beside her favorite perfume bottle, the one that smelled like every lie she'd ever told, and left the key on the counter. Before leaving, I stood at the doorway, taking one last look at the life I'd built for someone who never really wanted to build it with me. There was no rage, no tears, just a strange peace. I packed my car and drove off without looking back. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The silence that used to suffocate me now felt like freedom. That night, I slept in my new apartment, a single mattress on the floor. No furniture, no noise, and for the first time in months, I actually slept. The first few weeks alone were strange. I'd wake up expecting to hear Mia's alarm, to smell her perfume in the hallway. But all I got was quiet. It hurt at first. The silence was like an open wound I kept touching just to remind myself it was still there. But slowly, that silence became something else. Peace. For the first time in years, I didn't have to measure my worth through her eyes. I started working longer hours, not to prove anything, but because I wanted to. My boss noticed my focus and offered me a chance to manage a renovation project out of town. It paid more, and it meant a clean slate. I took it immediately. The crew respected me, and for the first time, I felt like my skills meant something. I wasn't the guy who didn't make enough. I was the guy who got things done. Every paycheck, I saved a little more, invested carefully, and rebuilt my life from the ground up. I rented a better place, bought new clothes, even joined a gym. Nothing flashy, just quiet progress. The kind no one posts about, but everyone eventually notices. And then one day, I realized something I hadn't thought about Mia in weeks. The bitterness that used to sit heavy in my chest was gone. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want her back. I just wanted peace. And I had finally found it. But peace has a strange way of attracting the past. One evening, after wrapping up at the site, I checked my email. Amid the invoices and project updates was a name I hadn't seen in months. Mia, my heart didn't race. It just paused. The subject line read, "I'm sorry. For a long time, I just stared at it, debating whether to open it." But curiosity, or maybe closure, won out. The message inside wasn't short. It was her unraveling. Her email started with a line that almost made me laugh. "I don't even know where to begin." That was the same thing she used to say when I'd ask what was wrong between us, except this time, I knew she actually meant it. The words spilled out like someone confessing to a crime long after the damage was done. She wrote about Ryan first, how it wasn't what I thought, how he helped her feel seen at first, but turned out to be manipulative and controlling. According to her, the relationship fell apart within weeks after I left. She claimed he used her connections, embarrassed her at work, and left her with nothing but shame. Then came the part that caught me off guard. "I realize now you were stronger than I ever gave you credit for. You carried us for years, and I made you feel small for it. I'm sorry." I read that line 3 times, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just a quiet sense of irony. She was finally seeing the strength she mocked, but only after it stopped revolving around her. She ended her message with, "I hope you're happy now. You deserve it. I just wish I'd realized sooner what I had." I didn't reply. I typed a few words, "I'm glad you're finding clarity," and deleted them. Then I closed my laptop and stared out the window at the city lights. For the first time, I understood what real closure felt like. Not dramatic, not loud, but peaceful. Because the truth is, I didn't need her apology. I didn't need her guilt. I'd already moved on long before she ever hit send. Still, as I sat there in the glow of my new life, I couldn't help but wonder, was she really sorry? Or just sorry she lost the version of me who would have forgiven her? It had been almost a year since I'd left when our paths crossed again, completely by accident. A mutual friend, Jenna, was hosting a small get-together to celebrate a promotion. I hadn't planned on staying long, but the universe had other ideas. I was grabbing a drink when I heard a familiar laugh. Soft, practiced, unmistakable. I turned, and there she was. Mia. She looked the same but different. Tired eyes, brittle smile, designer clothes that somehow looked heavier on her than before. When she saw me, her face froze. The confidence I remembered flickered into something else. Shock, maybe guilt. She walked over, clutching her glass like a lifeline. "Hey," she said quietly. "Didn't expect to see you here." I nodded. Same, there was an awkward silence, the kind that feels alive, thick with unsaid things. Finally, she sighed. "You look good." I smiled politely. "Thanks." "Been keeping busy." She looked down, fiddling with her ringless fingers. "I heard you're managing your own projects now." "That's amazing. You always had it in you." Her voice cracked slightly. For a moment, I saw the ghost of the woman I married, before ambition and pride hollowed her out. I shrugged. I just stopped waiting for someone else to believe in me. Her eyes glistened. "You really did change." I shook my head. "No, Mia, I didn't change. I just stopped letting you define what strength looks like." The silence that followed was long and heavy, but peaceful. There was no hate left in me, no fire, no bitterness, just quiet understanding. She smiled sadly. "You're happier now." "I am," I said simply, "and I hope you find that too." I meant it. Then I excused myself, said my goodbyes, and walked out into the cool night air. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to look back. Whatever tether had once bound us was finally gone, replaced by something she could never give me: freedom. Driving home from that party, I rolled down the windows and let the night air hit my face. It felt clean, sharp, the kind of cold that wakes you up rather than chills you. I realized then that the story of my marriage had finally ended, not with shouting or vengeance, but with quiet understanding. I didn't need to hate Mia. I didn't even need to forgive her. I just needed to move forward, and I already had Dot. In the months that followed, life began to feel mine again. I started hiking on weekends, something I'd given up years ago because Mia thought it was a poor man's hobby. I reconnected with old friends, people who remembered me before I started shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. My business kept growing. One project led to another, and before long, I wasn't just managing sites, I was running my own small company one morning. I came across an old photo, the two of us in our first apartment, sitting on the floor eating takeout, laughing over nothing. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a quiet sadness for the people we used to be. Love, I realized, isn't about who you build with, it's about how you build yourself when everything falls apart. Sometimes I hear updates about Mia through mutual friends. Apparently, she's trying to start over. I genuinely hope she finds peace. But I also know that she's finally seeing what she used to mock, the kind of strength that doesn't need validation or luxury to exist. I still remember her words that night. Stability isn't success. Maybe she was right, because success isn't about proving her wrong. It's about standing tall in the life I built, quietly, steadily, on my own. She called me weak once, but in the end, my silence, my peace, became the loudest answer she'd ever get.